Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture on IT governance. So in this lecture, we're going to look at what is IT governance, why is it important, its benefits, as well as three IT governance frameworks that we're going to look at and see how they can be implemented in running an IT department. So the reason why IT governance is very important is because it has been noted that in some departments or in some IT implementations, it's the technicians that are actually making the decisions and not management. So you'll find that decisions are being made based on the technologies that are being used or based on basically what is prevailing at that time. And there's no real structure that is being used in actually coming up with the decisions being made. So this is why IT governance is a very key topic, such that we run away from being controlled by the technology, but we start controlling the technology to achieve our goals. So what are some of the issues that we have to concern ourselves in IT as we look at IT governance? The first issue is IT funding. So we need to find a way of managing the funds that we have for IT as well as getting more funding for IT implementations or solutions. Then there's generally the issue of the information systems themselves. How do we manage them? How do we know this system is the best one? And how do we get them to work all together? There's also the issue of security and identity management. How do we make sure our systems are safe and that only people who are allowed to access those resources are the ones actually accessing them? Then there's the issue of strategic planning, that is aligning our IT strategy to the business strategy. How can we also assure that is happening and make sure that whatever action IT is taking is in line with the overall corporate strategy? Then there's the issue of development, support, and training of our human resource in IT, making sure that we have the best skills, we have the best talent, and everybody knows what they are doing and are aware of their responsibility in the IT department. Then there's also infrastructure management, making sure that our servers, our compute, our storage, and whatever else device or software that we use is relevant, is up to date, and is not costing us more than what it is actually bringing into the organization. There's also e-learning. Um, this may apply probably more to the training institutions or at times even when it comes to talent development in our organizations. Then there's also our web services, our enterprise level portals, which can also be in line with our information systems. Then there's also business continuity or disaster recovery. How do we make sure that, or how do we actually make sure that the business continuity plan we have can work? How do we make sure that we actually implement it and that it actually produces the results that we expect? Then lastly, there's the issue of governance, organization, and leadership of IT, which we'll cover under this IT governance topic. But you'll find that under IT governance now, we still have to look at all the other topics that we've looked at under the top 10 current IT issues. So we'll also delve into that as we go through this topic. So what is IT governance? Um, IT governance can be defined as the management of risk and compliance in IT. So we want to minimize risk in our solutions, whatever we're implementing or doing. We want to reduce the risk of failure. And also, we want to comply with either the business strategy or regulatory issues around our operating environment. IT governance can also be defined as the way or the method in which IT is directed, administered, and controlled. So directed, that's the leadership. Administered, that's how we actually deliver the service. And controlled is our audit and the various controls we put to make sure that we remain in line with what we are supposed to be doing. So IT governance as a method of directing, administering, and controlling IT helps in managing the increasing complexity in our IT management and administration. So you find that these days there are so many solutions that are coming into IT. There are so many management principles that also come into IT, and we now have to find a way of getting all those things to work together. And that's where IT governance comes into play because it creates a framework or it comes up with a standard that we can follow in managing all that complexity in delivering service as well as in making sure that we have got the right controls and audits in place. So when you're looking at IT governance, some of the issues that we have to deal with include strategic alignment of IT with business objectives. So this is looking at making sure that our IT strategy is aligned to the corporate strategy, or it's basically looking at IT business alignment. Then we also look at delivering value. So under IT governance, we are also trying to find a way that we can actually define the services that we are providing and be able to measure the value that those services are giving to the business. So we can come up with various technologies or solutions. We need to find a way to actually say this is delivering the value that we want to the business or the customer, and this is how we know that it is delivering it through these measures or key performance indicators that we will use for that. There's also the performance management. Performance management will apply both to the human resource as well as to the systems and to the processes that the human resource and the systems are actually facilitating. So you need to be able to measure what it is that you're doing, because you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So it's important to be able to find ways of measuring whatever it is that you're doing in IT, so that you know whether you're actually achieving something positive or you're actually moving backwards. Then IT governance, as we said before, is concerned with also managing risks and also the allocation and management of IT resources. So you could be that applies to things like funding, that applies to things like whether any hardware or software that you've bought, you need to know how you can use it optimally to, number one, get efficient and good service, and number two, to cut costs in service delivery. So why is it important for us to study IT governance? So IT governance helps us in guiding IT management. So it helps us in coming up with a framework or a structure in which we manage our IT environment and investments. It also helps us in making sure that we make the right IT implementations, we buy the right IT hardware and software, as well as whether they are investing in partnerships or in human resources and the like. It also helps us in making sure that we can make the right improvements as part of our continual development cycle in IT, where we want to make sure that whatever we're improving really becomes better and it makes our operations even better. It also looks at how we can manage our IT operations, and that we shall look at when we look at one of the IT governance frameworks later on. Then it can also be used as a reference for audit, which also will cover as one of our frameworks of study. So the benefits of IT governance would also include improved business processes. If we have a well-managed IT department, that means we can also come up with well-managed and very efficient business processes that can benefit the business at large. It also helps us in helping our staff to do more with less, or to become even more equipped to do what they're good at. So with IT governance, we know our weaknesses, we know our gaps, so we can help our staff plug all those limitations, weaknesses, and gaps, and we can continue improving our level of service delivery. We also get a better service delivery. We are better organized. We know our customers better, and we know what they want. So we are we are more likely to offer them better service at any given time. There's also faster delivery of solutions or of the services that we're giving, and increased innovation. So we can also quickly deploy or implement solutions that can help people. And we can also come up with innovative solutions, because we have got a structure that we are following that can help us guide us in our endeavor. There's also reduced risk, because now we have got controls and audits that help us to manage our risk. So now moving to the IT governance frameworks that we're also going to look at in detail. So what is an IT governance framework? Generally, an IT governance framework is more like a standard that has been developed to manage our IT environment. So why have these IT governance frameworks been developed? They have been developed to make sure that there is great alignment between business practices and technology, because it has been noted that there was a lack of alignment between the two. So what IT was doing was at times not congruent with what the business was doing. So there was need for us to align those two, and hence came the IT governance frameworks, which are standards that will help us to make sure that the IT strategy complements the corporate strategy. It also IT governance frameworks also help us by providing guidance to corporate management, so that we are always compliant with either regulatory or business issues. So you'll find that there will be times when in some industries they national or international regulators. So within IT governance frameworks, you make sure that at any one time you are able to be on top of whatever is happening and you are able to know whether you're compliant or not. Because at times you are penalized a lot of money by simply not being compliant, and you can lose a lot of pot- potential revenue because of that. So why would we also adopt a framework? As said before, it's to comply with regulatory requirements. Number two, it would also be a business requirement where the business itself says, you know what, we need something that can help us manage this, our IT. So let's adopt a framework that we can use for IT management. And then lastly, it's best in class. So at times we adopt IT governance framework simply because we know they work. We know this thing is going to deliver the service. It has been proven before. It has been used before. So we want to use it also in our environment to make sure that we get value for money. So in this lecture, we're going to look at three main frameworks. We're going to look at the COBIT framework. We're going to look at the ITIO version 3. Then we're also going to look at the ISO 27001. But those are not the only frameworks that are used in IT. We're going to just look at these ones as a way of understanding how these frameworks generally work and how we can implement them in our organizations. But as you can see, there are many other frameworks that you can use via IT, different ISO standards, and many others that we are not adopting to, that we're not looking at today that can also be adopted in our environments. So now we move to COBIT. So COBIT is a framework that is management oriented. In summary, COBIT is more to do with controls and audits and how to run your IT department in general. So the COBIT framework helps enterprise IT to generate maximum value via IT investments whilst mitigating risks and optimizing resources. So COBIT helps you to make sure that whatever you're doing as IT is aligned to the business goals. So that whatever is the business wants you to achieve, what the business wants to achieve overall, IT is also contributing in some way and in the best way possible to make sure that the business goals are achieved. So COBIT makes sure that we have all the controls, we have all the right measures and the right structure as an IT department to get our work going. So COBIT can also be said to provide the resources we need to make sure that we do our work well, to make sure that we cut costs, and also to make sure that we maintain the standards, whether for privacy or for system availability or for backups, whatever it is, and to make sure that we have got structure and oversight all of our IT processes in the company. So the resources that COBIT will be trying to make sure that they are fine or will be working with basically the frameworks, which make sure that we have got a good balance between the benefits that are going to accrue from IT as well as the risks that may be presented to us. There are also the processes that need to be made or put in place. Then there are the controls. The controls basically work with the audits to make sure that whatever it is that we said we want to do is actually being done. Then there are the management guidelines and the maturity models, which will assist in making sure that management is doing its work in a way that benefits IT overall. So the five guiding principles of COBIT are: number one, meeting stakeholder values or stakeholder needs. So this is making sure that we are giving value to the business in general. Then number two, making sure that we are covering the enterprise end to end. That is to make sure that we've got technologies that are catering for all the processes in the organization and making sure that all these technologies are helping the information flow from one department or one section to another seamlessly. Then thirdly, COBIT is also to make sure that we apply a single integrated framework with a single set of standards to be used across the business. So we do not want IT to have a myriad or different types of standards and frameworks trying to measure it. But we're trying to say, you know what, based on COBIT, we can actually come up with just one single framework that will govern everything happening within IT and will make sure that all the standards therein can be used across the department or the organization, whether we have got multiple business units or we've got various IT sections in our organization. All those standards can apply to all of them. Then fourthly, COBIT makes sure that we create an enabling holistic approach among the seven categories of enablers as defined by COBIT 5. I think you will see this when we look at the COBIT diagram just in a moment. And also COBIT separates governance from management, making sure that we have the right processes for governance to make sure that we are doing the right thing. And then management is just making sure that probably the KPIs or the goals of the organization are generally being met. So this is the COBIT diagram I was talking of. So you'll find that COBIT will focus on overall coming up with IT governance. And that means creating strategic alignment between IT and the corporate business, creating value for the business, managing risk, managing the resources in the IT department, as well as making sure that we can measure the performance of the IT investments that have been made. Then under IT governance now, we'll then come up with the business and governance requirements. And this business and governance requirements is where we look at our controls. What is it that we want to do? What are the requirements of the business? What is it that they want to monitor? What is it they would want to say if we are succeeding, then we are doing well? So that will be based on coming up with the information that you want to have, as well as the applications and the audits that you're going to put in place. Then once we have those requirements, then we can come up with the enabling information and technology. So we can come up with whatever it is that we now need to be able to meet these business and governance requirements. So this could be our IT resources in the form of applications, the information itself, the infrastructure, as well as the human resource. Then when we have identified these IT resources, we then focus on delivering the IT processes or the IT service to the people. And that's where we implement this cyclical approach where we plan and organize. And then after planning and organizing ourselves, we then acquire and implement. So we acquire the IT investments, whether they be software, hardware, or people. Then we deliver and support. So we deploy those resources, the people, the software, the hardware. We create the applications, people start using them, and then we maintain and support them. And then we also monitor and evaluate. So we monitor and evaluate for continual process improvement so that we are always improving what we're doing. After we have found some things that may need to be improved, we go back to the planning and organizing stage, and then we continue going through that cycle. So at the end of the day, COBIT is just making sure that firstly, we are governed as an IT department, coming up with the business and governance requirements, and then coming up with the information technology and the information required to do that. And then we come up with the actual processes that we're going to implement to be able to achieve. So, if I've mentioned before, in summary, COBIT basically looks at making sure that IT in overall has got audit, controls, and risk management that makes sure that whatever we are doing is being monitored, is approved, and it reduces the risk of actually failing or of coming up with catastrophic solutions for the business. So COBIT is management oriented, and now we move to ITIL, which is service delivery oriented. So ITIL stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library. So this is a framework that focuses on making sure that the IT service delivery in an organization is functioning well. So whilst COBIT is saying we want to make sure that we have got the right controls and audits in place, ITIL is saying how are we actually delivering the service to the people? What are our processes? Are the people happy? How do we make sure that people are actually getting exactly what they paid for, or the kind of service that will make them deliver the best results in an efficient manner? So ITIO is a widely accepted IT service management framework all over the world, which focuses on service delivery. It's non-prescriptive, which means it's a framework that gives you more like a structure. Basically, that's what a framework does, right? It just gives you a guidance or a guideline on what you're supposed to do, but it doesn't tell you exactly what to do. So it's up to you now, based on your business needs, to then adopt the various ITIO guidelines and then implement them in your business to suit your needs. So ITIO is organized into the following main service components. So firstly, there is service strategy, then service design, service transition, service operation, and continuous service improvement. So let's briefly just go through each one of them. So service strategy under ITIO focuses on how we come up with the strategy that we are going to use to deliver our services to people. So if we want to create an application or we want to come up with new processes, this is where we now think of how we can do that based on the strategy that we want to develop. So under strategy, we'll look at how we're going to manage the finances, how we're going to develop the strategy itself. What is our portfolio looking like? So the service portfolio is made up of services that you are thinking of creating, services that are actually being used by people, and services that have been decommissioned. So the portfolio gives you everything that you have worked on as a business. So you also need to manage that to see which services do you want to deploy, which ones do you want to decommission, and which ones do you want to keep running in your organization. Then after you've come up with your service strategy, where you now know the direction that you want to take in delivering a certain service to your organization, you then move on to designing those services. So you have decided on the services that you want to develop. You've decided on the services that you want to use. Now you go to designing and coming up with the actual services that you're going to be using. So under service design now, this is where you're now looking at your service portfolio design. You're now looking at what is it that we are working on, that we have already deployed and that we have decommissioned, and how do we want to create that balance. Then we look at the service catalog management. Under service catalog, we're now looking at what are the actual services that are currently being used in our organization. Then we look at service level management. This speaks to the quality of service that you want to deliver to the user. So as you design your application, your website, or whatever else, or deploy some infrastructure, you want to make sure that that infrastructure can meet the service level that you have agreed with other people. For example, you could say our systems will have 99% availability, our backups will be 100% restorable. So you want to make sure that the technologies or services that you design can actually meet those service levels that you've agreed for. Then there's capacity management, making sure you have enough resources, availability management, making sure that your systems are always available or are always working when they are required. So under availability management, again, you may also look at how much uptime do you require for a system? Is it 99%, 100%, or whatever that you agree with your stakeholders? There's also the issue of service continuity, which is also covered under business continuity to make sure that the service in the event of a disruption can continue being given to the people. Then there's the issue of security management, supplier management. So when you're looking at coming up with a service, you have to consider all these things and make sure that your service can actually meet those things. So when you've designed your service, you're happy that it has met all the requirements, you then move to the service transition stage. So the service transition stage is where you are now preparing your product or solution for deployment so that it can start being used by people. So under this stage now, that's where you're verifying to make sure that the service or the system or application that has been designed can actually deliver the required service to the stakeholders. So under this stage, that's where you look at change management, where you're now thinking of how do I make sure that my application that I'm deploying can continue working with other applications, or this update that I'm making can work without interrupting what has already been going on already. Then there's a service asset and configuration management, where you're making sure that you know everything that has been deployed, the order in which it has been deployed, and the various releases that are also working in tandem with your deployment. There's also knowledge management, making sure that everybody has been trained and they know everything that needs to be done. There is release planning, making sure that your releases are well organized and they're in a good order and at good times. Performance and risk evaluation, making sure that you test your release, making sure that you also build it, and then making sure that after you've done that, there are enough tests and pilots that have been done to make sure that the system is working as required. And then when you've done all that under service transition, that's when you deploy the application and transfer it to the operations team. So under service operation, this is where now the system is actually in use. It's now being used by people in your organization or by your customers. And under service operation now, you're basically focusing on making sure that the application continues working and it continues delivering value. So that's where you have issues to do with event, incident, problem and access management, making sure that whatever incident, whatever issue has arisen can be solved in the minimum amount of time possible so that people can quickly go back to work using that same application. There's also request fulfillment. Whatever new requests come, you are able to fulfill them as and when they're required on the system. And then there are issues to do with IT operations, making sure that you've got your backups working, you've got your monitoring working, the support team is supporting all the users. Then there's IT security. Then we've got our service desk, making sure that it's handling all this the requests or the issues that people may have, making sure that we have got proper technical and IT operations management, and making sure that our application is also managed and is working well. So service operation is making sure that once we have deployed our application, it continues working well. We support all the users who may be having any challenges, and we make sure that the service delivers according to the agreed service level agreements. Once we're done with deploying the application and we are satisfied that it's now working fine, then we move on to continuous service improvement. So under continuous service improvement, we're basically trying now to say, given the performance of the application or of our service right now, are we happy with it? What can we improve? And when we have improved it, how can we then deploy the improvements? So we look at measuring and coming up with controls to make sure that we can actually monitor the quality of service we're having. We then look at how we assess and analyze the quality of service, and also looking at our service level, service levels that we had agreed before. So under service level management, now we're now looking back at our SLAs and saying, are they really what we really want? Can we meet them, or are they even too broad such that they are difficult to meet? So once you have gone through the continuous service improvement stage, you then go back to the service strategy stage where you look at these improvements that you want to make now. Are they in line with our service strategy? If they're in line, then you adopt them. Then you move to the service design stage. After the service design, after designing the service, you move to the service transition where you prepare the service for deployment. Then under service operation, you would have deployed, and now your users are using that service. And after the users are using it, you go back to continual service improvement to continue improving, and the cycle goes on and on and on and on. So that's how ITIO works. It makes sure that you've got the best way of managing your IT service delivery, whilst COBIT is making sure that you've got all the right audit controls in place to make sure that you can manage your risks and give out the best management of IT in your organization. So the benefits of ITIO include improved resource utilization because we're able to manage them better, deduplication of tasks and responsibilities. So by actually being on top of everything that we're doing, we can remove unnecessary tasks, unnecessary processes, and unnecessary responsibilities. We also eliminate redundant work. We also deliver our projects on time, and we improve system performance, better integrated business processes. We learn from previous experience through our continual service improvement part, as well as we have clear performance indicators. So this is basically what ITIO is about. So COBIT focuses more on IT management and audit controls, whilst ITIO focuses more on service delivery. So now we move to another framework, which is ISO 27001. This is a standard that is used to come up with a way of managing our information security in the organization. So ISO 27001 helps us look at organization information security risks, and it helps us to do so in a systematic way, making sure that we account for all threats, vulnerabilities, and impacts. It's also designed to make sure that we have got a comprehensive information security controls suite that can take into cognition things like risk avoidance, risk transfer, and risk acceptance where possible. Then it also helps us to come up with a management process that also helps us to make sure that our information security controls are always meeting up with our business needs as well as with our regulatory issues. So under the ISO 27001, we've got three main phases. The first one is where we do mainly the definition of what we are trying to do. Then on phase two, that's where we are identifying our risks, we are analyzing the risks. Then we look at how we can treat or undertake risk treatment, and also select the controls that we're going to put in place to make sure that those risks don't affect us. Then in phase three, we then look at implementing the various objectives and controls that we have chosen. So phase three is mainly looking at training our people, coming up with the infrastructure required, and implementing all those things. So in a nutshell, ISO 27001 is looking just at security. It's got three main phases, and it's got about 10 steps. And you can go through each one of the steps to see what's happening at each step so that you can get a better understanding of it. So we have looked at three main frameworks, and these three frameworks cover almost the same things but in different ways. So on the slide, you can actually see how you can compare the various frameworks, what each one covers, what each one has. So the key thing to note is that COBIT covers mapping IT processes, that is IT management oriented audit controls. ITIO is focused on IT service delivery, and ISO 20001 is focused on information security administration. So when it comes to implementation, you'll find that this one, COBIT, is very good for information system audits. ITIO is good at looking at our managing our service levels and service level agreements. And ISO 27000 is also looking at making sure that we are compliant when it comes to security standards. Now, at times we may think that the various frameworks work in isolation, but that is actually not the case. In most instances, you'll find that these frameworks work together to create a unified IT governance framework. So, because the various frameworks cover different things or are mainly geared towards a certain thing, they can also work together in delivering service to just one organization. So, we can look at the example of COBIT and ITIL. Whilst COBIT is looking at audits, ITIO is looking at service delivery. So that means when it comes to audit issues, we can use COBIT. And when it comes to IT service delivery, we can use ITIO. And if you use the two frameworks together, we get a very good combined framework that acts perfectly for any organization. We can do the same. We can do the same with ISO 27001 as well, where we can combine ITIO for IT service delivery, COBIT for control for IT management and controls, and ISO 27000 for security frameworks. So by having COBIT looking at the overall IT management, ITIO looking at the IT service delivery section, and 2001 looking at IT security, we can actually have the best in class in each of the areas that we need to look at in IT. So these frameworks do not usually work in isolation, but we always take something from all those frameworks and we combine them to come up with a good framework that is good for us. And that's the good thing about these frameworks, that they are non-prescriptive. So if they are not prescriptive, that means we can actually produce a framework of our choice based on the recommendations and guidelines of all these frameworks. So it's not a bad thing to combine these frameworks. They can work in isolation, but it's always greater and better to combine them in various ways to suit the needs of our organization. So thank you very much for listening to this lecture on IT governance, and hope you have learned a lot.